Um, Again, yeah, thanks for having me here today. Taking Cheryl's place. This is a very deep, comprehensive research study on emerging trends in energy management. We try to extract all the pertinent information to Texas to kind of give you an idea of what Texas business leaders are thinking about. Again, you'll be able to, I'll provide the link so you can download the full study after this, but again, it's a lot of information. I'm gonna kind of fly through it, but if you got questions, stop me. However, we're gonna start off the conversation with a fishtail. And probably a lot of you are thinking that, well, that's appropriate for a consultant. But anyway, how many people in here like to fish? Okay, in particular, does anybody in here fish the Galveston Bay Complex? Okay, now do y'all remember what the Galveston Bay Complex was like 20 years ago? Okay, remember the color of the water? Would you eat the fish that you caught out of the Galveston Bay Complex 20 years ago? Okay, well, no, I wouldn't, if you even caught anything. So the point I'm going to get into on this is that, you know, the rehab, the change of the Galveston Bay Complex started with a few conservationists that said, you know, we have a great natural resource here, and we need to protect it, and we need to turn it into something. And we need to have policy, and we need to have regulations, and we need to have people dedicated to do that. And that started 20 years ago. And everybody's looking at here at this beautiful green water. If you go across the bridge and how, you know, nice it looks, it took a while to get there, and it took, you know, people kind of continuously pounding away. You know, we want to make this better. This is a good idea. We want to make it work. And so, what did you result in? Well, that was 2 weeks ago off the Galveston jetties, and one really happy 14-year-old, and that is about a 32-inch redfish, and we caught and released a bunch more of them. But again, that's something that wouldn't happen without a lot of efforts from people like the people in this room to make this natural resource better and protect it. So now, get off the soapbox a little bit and get into the results. Big study. One nice thing about Deloitte is we do have the large auditing practice, and generally if your auditor asks you a question, you answer it, and you answer it truthfully. So when we do these types of things, we get a lot of you know, responses. People tend to, at least from other businesses I've been in, I was really kind of shocked and amazed at how much information we got from companies when we asked them. But we did about 2,200 residential consumers. Again, that survey is available, the report's available online. We're going to focus on the business one today. We did 600 businesses. I'll show you kind of sizes and geographic disbursement, industry disbursement a little bit later. 40 companies headquartered in Texas. Okay, kind of the highlights of it are things are getting better. I think I was talking to Tom about this last night. You know, there's a lot of people in the room. We feel like we've been pushing a ball up a hill for, you know, many years, trying to get energy efficiency to take hold, trying to get policy change in Texas to make things more cost-effective, more achievable. And we're starting to see some forward motion. That was the encouraging thing for me looking at this report is a lot of the companies in Texas and even in the US did not have any type of formalized energy goals or energy reduction goals as recently as 3 years ago. Can everybody hear me fine? Okay, good. If you look at it, we've now got over 54% of the companies in Texas, again, that's extrapolating from the sample group, they've actually formalized their energy goals. Now, one of the things that came out, and this is to be expected, the focus in Texas is not on the environment, it's not on carbon, it's on being competitive, okay? So they've realized a lot of the companies that started out 3 or 4 years ago that says, okay, I want to reduce my carbon footprint and started focusing on reducing energy consumption around the carbon footprint, figured out pretty quickly that it made really good business sense because it lowered my cost of goods sold, it made me more competitive in the world markets. And so you've seen this transition, over the past few years, really over the past 2 years, where they're going like, yeah, okay, the environment, the green stuff's really nice, but this is about making me more competitive. And that's a business case that pretty much everybody in Texas understands. Targets, expected reductions. This is another one that kind of popped out at me. Is these companies are setting goals that they want to reduce their energy consumption, especially around electricity, by 25% in 3 years. That's a pretty big number. Now, Texas is a little bit lower than that. The general goals for the Texas companies are around 20%. Part of that has to do with we've got pretty low energy cost in Texas. But that's still a pretty good number, a pretty sizable number. And if you think about, maybe real quickly, if you did the numbers on 20% of the electricity load in Texas, you're very quickly into the hundreds of millions of dollars saved that the state can do something else with, or the companies can do something else with. Okay, renewable self-generation. This one, again, was a little surprising to me because I would have put Texas higher on the list. But you're seeing a lot of companies with renewables, with self-generation. Texas, again, is lagging a little bit in that. You're starting to see more plans, especially as the cost of solar is going down. But that's where we are right now. And capital investment, again, very encouraging number that companies are looking at putting 14% of the capital budgets into some type of energy conservation, energy reduction type of improvement or program. And again, focused on becoming more competitive rather than necessarily an environmental impact or a carbon impact. Okay, who we talked to? Just pretty much broad brush, try to capture all industries and all sizes of companies. So the 40% can be somewhat, or 40 companies can be extrapolated out to, other companies, organizations that you're familiar with. 90% of the companies have set, some type of energy goals. That's up a good bit from even a year ago. I think a year ago we were somewhere around 82%. The goals in Texas, we're actually leading. So you've got 54% of the companies are looking at having some type of formal goal that they're tracking. But see the headline. They view it as cost reduction is about staying competitive, less about image. And you can see the kind of breakdown. Texas, those are the Texas headquartered companies compared to the rest of the U.S. Around some of the questions that we ask. Now, is that surprising to anyone, or that kind of was what I was expecting to see out of Texas-based companies? These efforts tend to be led by the top, so a lot of it's coming out of the CEO, the CFO offices. So when you're in, talking to companies about what you can do to reduce energy cost, it's really elevated to that C-level now. I can remember back 4 or 5 years ago, you had the energy manager that was pretty far down in the organization. That didn't necessarily have the power of the pen to write a big check. Nowadays, again, is really in the past 2 to 3 years that's shifted more up into the top of the organization. So it's getting to be pretty high profile. Again, Texas focusing on the natural gas consumption reduction, less on carbon footprint, and big focus on can we reduce our electricity consumption. This one is also encouraging, and in fact, we've been doing a lot of work, and again, increasingly important to the state is the idea of the energy water nexus, that you can't have an energy policy without having a water policy, and you can't really have an effective water policy without having a good energy policy. And you're starting to see, companies sort of think the same way. I know we've done some work looking at, where helping a company site data centers. And the first thing you do is go, okay, well, you need to go where there's cheap electricity prices. That's all well and good, but then if you start overlaying what the drought picture looks like for the next 20 years, you start seeing, areas of the country drop off the map. If you can site a data center there now because there's cheap electricity, but they're not going to have any water in 10 years to continue generating electricity, so what do you do? So you're starting to see, companies start to talk about the overall resource mix rather than just a specific energy policy or a specific, waste policy or a specific water policy. Again, this is the one, getting back to pushing the ball up the hill. 2.5 years. This ball started, I won't say it's over the top of the hill, but it's definitely gaining a lot more momentum than I've seen as long as I've been involved with this anyway. And, very encouraging that, again, the decisions have gotten elevated up to the C-suite. People are putting a business and competitive focus on it, and people, are starting to put these formalized plans in place to look at improving their energy efficiency, reducing their footprint. Now this one, and I'll open it up, Tom, somebody, maybe Michael, comments, is the Texas companies said they were less challenged with keeping up with their energy-related financial and tax incentives. Now, is that because there are none? The fact that, they don't have any trouble tracking them because as compared to, other states, there's not a lot of incentive or potentially tax credits available for any type of energy conservation programs. Again, that 20 to 25% goal, people are moving along pretty well with it. It wasn't just, pie in the sky. It was set 2 to 2.5 years ago. Second year into it, and people are saying, we're about 2/3 of the way there, which is exactly where they ought to be. So again, very encouraging sign that they're, not just talking about it, they're actually putting the feet on the street and the dollars behind it to make the goals achievable. The, Texas companies, a little bit easier time monitoring performance against the goals. That's just because Texas companies are better, I guess. Okay. Now here is an interesting one to talk about is, okay, for the people who aren't achieving the goals or aren't setting the goals, where are the problems, where are the barriers at? You look at this, where are the issues, and we'll just talk about where are the issues for Texas, and they tend to be around capital, and they tend to be around some type of return on investment or internal hurdle rates. And you can circle that conversation back to, if you've got a internal hurdle rate of, let's say, 20% to get an energy efficiency project done, and you got a project for y'all, like in the ESCO world, a lot of these projects always come in at like 15 to 17%, right? Can't quite make that 20%. However, if you had just a little bit of an incentive out there, then you would be able to get over their hurdle rate and get the project done. So, that's kind of echoed in these responses. That's where they're falling short of getting the projects done. So again, something to consider as we go into the next legislative session. Should there be a little bit more incentive put at this given the overall statewide impact? And I'm sure no one's surprised at this one. But having said that, we do a lot of carbon tracking for a lot of really large companies. Okay, so it'll get into, they want to track it so they can make sure they get the right, tax credits for it. But one of the things that they're starting to learn is tracking your carbon and then leading to tracking the energy consumption in your business tells you so much about the state of operations of your business, and also gives you a very good metric to compare efficiency of operations, not just the energy part of it, but the overall operations from division to division. So we're starting to see people say, wait a minute, I can look at this data. You're telling me more from your carbon tracking data than I was able to get out of all my divisional vice presidents. So we're starting to see some kind of movement there, that people are understanding that, well, everything I do requires some form of energy input. If I'm tracking that energy input, I got a really good handle on all the activities that my company is engaged in right now, and I can track how well they're performing. So again, some kind of positive motion getting this into a good business case. This one was a little surprising to me. I would have thought that, given Texas and given the kind of volatility that we always see on electricity prices, that you would have seen, a few more people thinking that the prices might go up a little bit more. But I guess we're also kind of tuned into $2.50 natural gas and how long that's going to last. Okay, again, on-site generation, we talked about that a little bit earlier. Texas is a little behind on that one. On the renewable energy purchasing, interesting here is yes, but not anymore. So if you go back and look, probably 4 years ago, there was a spike in the purchase of renewable energy. A lot of people were buying green energy products. Now they've gone back to just buying regular electricity. And again, it gets back to the overall, what's the underlying driver for all the businesses here? Is, how do I get my cost in line? How do I get my costs down? Again, I thought this was an incredibly encouraging number. This has been trending up everywhere over the past few years. Is 15% of the capital budgets are now being dedicated toward some type of energy cost reduction program. That bodes well on a lot of different fronts for the state. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Is how do you get the projects through? Is there the potential for adding a few incentives to help the companies push these projects over the finish line? Again, tracking of the tax credits. Texas companies not that interested in it. Now we took the data, and this is somewhat of a work in progress, but we tried to cut it up and look at some similar attributes and do the segmentation, because we were getting a lot of questions from companies, organizations. How am I doing? How am I doing compared to everybody else? Where am I in this energy efficiency spectrum? Am I doing a good job? Am I not doing a good job? What are the things I need to be doing better? How can I get better at it? And not to read through there, but you can see kind of what the attributes are of these three different areas. And it's kind of like the people that have really embraced it and are really going after it, the pioneers. You got the reactors, which are, if you make me do something, I'm going to do it. And those tend to be people. There is no such thing as global warming. And then the engagers are kind of in the middle, trying to figure it out. Now, so how does Texas step with that? And this is another. And it gets a lot more detailed. If you want to go into and look at your company, look at your organization, and determine what your drivers are around some type of energy efficiency program, policy, or shift, and actually drive it down to where are the people's attitudes inside the company that are responsible for doing this, And, therefore, depending on where they fall in the spectrum, what do we need to do to change them, to get more of the company engaged and thinking about conservation and efficiency, in their daily work life. But Texas is a bit split. But we do have a lot more people out there on, the leading edge trying to make this work than the rest of the country. And then you've got more people that are actively now trying to figure it out. And that kind of goes back to the earlier statement, in the past 2.5 years, the number of people with formalized goals, putting emphasis on it at the top level, has really shot up. But we're still got a lot of the reactors that are saying, I don't really need to be doing anything about this. Okay, that is the end of the presentation. I've got about 25 copies of the printed report up there. If anybody would like to take, the printed report home with them, just come up and get one. I guess you'll make this available online, so you can go into the website and download the full versions of the reports. I think they're about 65 pages each. And there's one for commercial, one for industrial, and then one for residential. But that's questions?
Will your presentation also be on that?
Yes. Any other questions? Nope.
David, we're going to come back to questions after.
Okay.